Good afternoon, distinguished delegates, colleagues, and friends joining us here in person, and about 80 people who have signed up online. So we're looking forward to including you. Please do raise your questions towards the end. And thank you for signing up, and we're looking forward to having you. On behalf of the organizers, the Center for Dialogue and Progress-Geneva, Permanent Mission of Afghanistan, the Global Center for Responsibility to Protect, it's my pleasure to welcome you all to the site event entitled Building a Victim and Survivor-Centered Investigative Mechanism for Afghanistan, Lessons from Victims and Civil Society Engagement in Syria and Myanmar. My name is Mahmoda Sonia Eqbal, and I am a board member for Center for Dialogue and Progress-Geneva. This event is co-hosted by Permanent Mission of Iceland, Denmark, Luxembourg, Spain, Austria, and Belgium, and the Center for Human Rights Advocacy. The discussion builds on the earlier panel on the operationalization of the investigative mechanism for Afghanistan and is designed to look deeper at the victim and civil society engagement. This session focuses on something more operational and arguably decisive for success: how the newly established mechanism for Afghanistan can or shall engage victims and civil society in practice. In October 2025, the Human Rights Council took a historic step in establishing the Independent Investigative Mechanism for Afghanistan, IIMA. This mechanism was not created in isolation. It was the definitive result of tireless advocacy from Afghan victims and civil society. Its credibility and effectiveness will therefore depend fundamentally on collaboration with CSOs and meaningful engagement with survivors, especially given the likelihood of access and operational constraints. Today's focus is practical. What are the main demands of Afghan civil society, and what lessons can be drawn from the experience of existing mechanisms, particularly the International Impartial and Independent Mechanism of Syria and the Independent Investigative Mechanism for Myanmar, about building trust, managing expectations, reporting back to communities, and working with the civil society as partners rather than mere sources. Our objective is to identify best practices that can be replicated both by IIMA and Afghan civil society actors themselves. Before we begin the panel, I now invite Ambassador Andesha to deliver a few welcoming remarks.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, Excellencies, colleagues, dear ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I just want to, again, as I did in the Council, begin my remarks by sending our condolences and the prayers to these very recent victims of a senseless violence between the Taliban and Pakistan, which, including my family, were all awake in Kabul city last night. So we are calling also for cessation of this violence and dialogue. Excellencies, the establishment of the Independent Investigative Mechanism for Afghanistan has been a long overdue demand from the people of Afghanistan, but also for the civil society organizations and human rights defenders, some of whom are here at this panel. And I really congratulate them and thank them for their efforts. Now that we have the mechanism established, as they say that the devil is in the details, we have brought here a group of experts to look at how best this mechanism could be operationalized and what are the lessons that we can draw from the previous and the current investigative mechanisms. Hence the distinguished panels, which in my right side are here. I think it's, I'm sure the interest that you can see in this room and also online is because we are going to have a very fruitful but also technical and detailed discussion about the lessons and how we can best use your expertise and experiences for this mechanism for Afghanistan. Since I was given 2 to 3 minutes, I will end and just wanted also to echo you, Ms. Eqbal, that I would like to take the opportunity to thank the organizers, Center for Dialogue and Progress, our own mission, of Afghanistan, Global Center for Responsibility to Protect, and Center for Human Rights Advocacy, but also a very large number of the permanent representatives here, and permanent mission of Iceland. And I thank them for the breakfast that they offered this morning and the discussion with the large group of the Afghan civil society. Denmark, we have Ambassador Mehdi, who is the special envoy for Afghanistan, and thanks for the joint statement that you delivered during the council. Permanent mission of Spain's always been a supporter, Austria, Luxembourg, last but not least, Belgium. So with this, I'll just hand it over back to you, and we will wish you a very fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Andisha, for setting the tone. And with that, now we'll now move to our panelists. Please remember that everyone will have 5 minutes for their initial intervention.
Sorry, I forgot Luxembourg, the Duchy of Luxembourg.
Sure. I'll pose one consolidated guiding question to each speaker to help them frame their conversation. And I'll start today's panel with Ms. Michelle Jarvis. Our first speaker is Ms. Michelle Jarvis, Deputy Head of International, Impartial, and Independent Mechanism for Syria. Since 2017, she has led the IIIM's victim and survivor-centered strategies and its structured engagement with Syrian civil society. Previously, she served as Deputy Prosecutor at the International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia and litigated cases before both the ICTY and ICTR, former Yugoslavia and Rwanda tribunals. She brings deep prosecutorial experience combined with practical innovation and victim engagement. Ms. Jarvis, reflecting on the IIIM's experience, what concrete engagement models, tools, and frequency have proven most effective in building sustained trust-based partnerships with victims and civil society, from evidence collection to follow-up, and particularly support to universal jurisdictions cases? You have 5 minutes.
Well, thank you so much, and good afternoon to everybody. It's really great to see so many people here in the room, and greetings, of course, also to those of you who are joining online for the discussion. There is a lot to say, actually, in terms of lessons learned from the IIIM's now 9 years of experience in building a victim and survivor-centred approach, specifically in the context of these more novel new justice facilitation mandates, the investigative mechanisms. Definitely much more than we can cover in 5 minutes. So I'll do my best to touch on some of the key lessons learned and strategies that might be useful to think about as other mechanisms now begin operationalizing. But I did just want to take a moment to make 2 more overarching comments about the experience that we've had at the IIIM that I think are really important to bear in mind as other mechanisms move forward. And for us, in the context of Syria, these are things that really come into sharp focus right now, given the dramatic change of circumstances in Syria. So we see our work in a much more overarching long-term context. So the first more overarching point is really about the peace-justice nexus, and keeping in mind that ultimately, what we're seeking to do with this kind of work is to prepare inclusive foundations for justice for the future that will really facilitate the goal of rebuilding communities and fostering rights-based, peaceful societies in the future. That's, of course, the exact challenge now on the table for Syria. And that means that it is so important that the justice foundations that we create are reflecting the views and priorities of victims and survivors, and that it does so in a way that's inclusive. So this is a really crucial lesson to keep in mind, that broad spectrum between justice and peace. And the second, and it's very related, is that an effective victim survivor centered approach really fundamentally requires a mindset shift on the part of accountability actors. So what has really made the big difference at the IIIM, I would say, is a genuine change in how we view our roles as justice actors, and genuinely placing victims and survivors as the North Star, I would say, of the decision-making about justice-related work. So it's a completely different philosophy and tone of engagement from a model where justice priorities are decided upon by justice actors on behalf of victims and survivors. So, of course, the big question is, what does that look like in practice? How can we actually follow through on that? Well, an important early idea from the IIIM experience, of course, is the idea of having a regular platform of engagement between the mechanism and the affected communities. And here I think we really have to acknowledge the foresight of the Netherlands and Switzerland as the early champions of this idea, in our case, in the context of our Lausanne platform. But we could very quickly see that we needed to expand our engagement out beyond the Lausanne platform. So that was a central pillar, but in and of itself not enough, because we realistically could only really reach 25 civil society actors in the context of a convening. We also had problems that emerged early on, like gender imbalance in the composition of the participants. Despite best efforts, there are structural barriers. And we also realised we needed to move beyond an outreach approach to these consultations to a much more operational engagement. So over the years, we've added layers of engagement. We now have 2 regular annual convenings. So we have the Lausanne platform still, and we convene civil society actors working on documentation, so more with a technical expertise focus. But we also have a victim and survivor association consultation. And this is where we bring together victim survivor associations, also individual victims and survivors, so we can hear very directly their views on our work, and we can hear what their priorities are for justice. We then use those insights to feed back into the planning and prioritisation of our own work. So I think that is really an important new precedent that should be kept in mind for future work. We have also supplemented this with ad hoc online engagements, especially to try and reach more marginalised communities. So women, I mentioned the challenges of overcoming some of the barriers that prevent women's voices from being heard. Also youth, it's been important to create spaces to hear directly with young people, and there are a number of other focus group areas that we've looked at to try and reach regions in Syria that have not had as much attention to their experiences as they should have. We've also published a written bulletin to supplement this several times a year, which is really designed to give affected communities information in a way that's accessible to them about the work that we've been doing. So I think with all of these layers, we've had positive indications that we've made a lot of progress in building trust, but it is a work in progress. We keep testing approaches, adjusting as we go along, and now in the context of the new circumstances in Syria, of course, we have to go back to the drawing board a little bit and think again about how do we reach people who are now accessible who were not before.
Thank you so much. Those were great a way to start, and already getting a good sense of how has it worked and what are the challenges. I think that's a lot of food for thought as we are trying to learn. With that, I'm going to move to our second panelist, Ms. Thembile Segoete. I'm really sorry if I'm not pronouncing it properly.
It's all right.
Please tell me.
Segoete.
Segoete. Segoete. It's my pleasure to introduce Ms. Thembile Segoete, Senior Legal Officer in IIIM's practice. How are the communities consulted, and how do such consultations and victims' experiences shape investigative priorities and case selection, if at all? And how does the IIIM's manage expectations, avoid extractive engagement, and report back to victims and civil society in ways that protect investigations while ensuring transparency. What elements would be most transferable to similar contexts, such as Afghanistan?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to the organizers for inviting us here to share with you our experiences, particularly on engagements with civil society organizations in the context of investigations that we do. So in terms of how communities are consulted, it is through the civil society organizations that are on the ground in Myanmar. And this is the most effective way because as the IIMM, we do not have access to the country. And the easiest way, when you are an investigative mechanism, the easiest way of collecting evidence is through engagement with witnesses and victims. But because we don't have access to the country, it is a little bit difficult for us to have that face-to-face consultations. So we do go through CSOs. Why is it important to go through CSOs? Because they are the people who are on the ground, and in most instances, they are the first responders. They're usually the first to get onto the scene to witness what has happened. They are the first to gather all the evidence that we would need, and then most importantly, to connect us with the witnesses that we can speak with. So in this regard, I'll also highlight that it is very important to have a relationship of trust with the CSOs on the ground. Because in all conflict situations, as is the case also in Afghanistan, CSOs have long been in existence even before the conflicts begin. And also even before the mechanisms are established. So by the time the mechanisms are established, CSOs have been on the ground, they know what happened, they know where, they know who was affected, and they know who the perpetrators are. And as they go around doing their work, they are also doing a lot of documentation. So they are very important in terms of first linking us with witnesses, and then also providing investigative materials that also now assist us to build further investigative needs. Now, the importance of having a good working relationship with CSOs is that the trust we build between us and them is easily transferable to the trust that the witnesses will have on us and have the confidence that they can speak with us freely and comfortably. I will highlight here particularly victims of SGBC crimes because they're the most vulnerable. And they are the ones that require most care in how you speak with them, how you approach with them. And when we have CSOs that have already established this relationship of trust with them, that trust becomes very easily transferable to us. Likewise, when the CSOs feels like they can trust us, they are able to also transfer that to the victims and witnesses, and then we're able to have access to them in an open manner where they are now comfortable to share their information with us. So one of the things that we do at the IIMM, which is also contributes to the level of success, is the fact that in our staffing teams, we have people who have a relationship with the country, either because they were born there or they have lived there or they have worked there or all of the above. They know the culture, they know the language, all languages, they know the politics, they know the history. So those are the best people to put forward to start having that engagement first of all, and then conversations can continue. Now, on your second question about how to avoid extractive engagements and report back to victims, it is very important to be transparent on the do's and don'ts and what our mandate requires of us to do. It's very important, and we do highlight all the time we have engagements with CSOs that we are not a police force, so we cannot effect arrests. We are not a prosecution service, so we cannot put anyone before a court. We're not a judicial institution, so we cannot try anyone for crimes that have been committed. So CSOs engage with us and encourage witnesses to come forward and engage with us, knowing fully well what we can do and cannot do. So that openness and transparency is also very important towards building this two-way relationships without having overbearing expectations of one another. How we then mitigate the expectations of the CSOs to also get something off us is to now have these engagements with them where we explain how we have used information that they have given us. On an annual basis, every year, we have civil society dialogues where we meet in person with the CSOs that we are in consultation with, and we share progress on work. And one of the things we also are always careful about in managing these expectations is also to make sure that we don't jeopardize our own investigations and future trials by oversharing what we're not supposed to share with the CSOs. And on that, we are covered by our terms of reference, which clearly state that we can only share information with judicial authorities in the context of criminal proceedings. So CSOs are aware of that. We always put it forward for them to understand. Then in that manner, there is no expectation of us to share information with them because that is outside the mandate. So additional to the annual CSDs that we have in person, we also do engage with them online as frequently as possible as the proceedings, as the investigations continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to our third speaker. We're joined by Fadel AbdulGhany, Executive Director of Syrian Network for Human Rights. Mr. AbdulGhany is online, so I do request all of you to please put the headphones on because only then you will be able to properly hear him. He has been deeply involved in documenting human rights violations, journalists and human rights defenders, and investigative methodologies, and engaging directly with international accountability bodies, including the IIIM. Mr. AbdulGhany, from your experience, what ways and practical modalities do the Syrian CSOs use to collaborate with the IIIM and contribute to the investigations? What role do they play in engaging victims, assuring safety, and managing their expectations? Are there any good practices that could be replicated by Afghan CSOs and some pitfalls that should be avoided?
Okay, so each one of these questions need half an hour, so please, I want your attention. Thank you very much for the invitation and for having me. I'm honored to be with you. So actually, the IIIM was established at the end of 2016. However, some civil society organizations like Syrian Network for Human Rights, SNHR, began documenting violations in 2011, years before the IIIM inception. From the outset, the IIIM recognized the value of the work and sought to engage civil society. For its part, civil society viewed the IIIM as a critical opportunity to break the cycle of impunity in Syria and to support the development of cases addressing grave human rights violations. SNHR was the first organization to sign a bilateral cooperation agreement with the IIIM and begin formal data sharing. Over the 15 years of my career, documenting human rights violations and leading one of the largest Syrian human rights organizations, I can say that our engagement with the UN investigation mechanism, like Commission of Inquiry, so not only IIIM, but the Commission of Inquiry, the High Commissioner, UNICEF, and IIIM, and IIMP, so almost the majority of the UN institution, except UN Security Council. So this cooperation has produced meaningful results, advancing accountability and strengthening protection of victims' rights. IIIM and a credible local Syrian organization neither can succeed without the other. This complementary relationship is reflected in the comprehensive report, nearly 300 pages, issued past year on detention and torture under Assad regime. The IIIM led the effort with diligence, and we contributed substantial data and documentation. The result is a report that upholds victims' rights and places their experience at the center of accountability process. Our collaboration has also extended to cases in Europe under universal jurisdiction. So through this work, we have deepened our experience because as a human rights organization, we have experience in human rights law, not that much in international criminal law. Importantly, our collaboration has continued following the fall of Assad, of the dictator Assad regime. We have held multiple meetings, and the head of the IIIM visited our office in Damascus. That was like a symbolic and milestone for us that we are working now inside Syria. And I met with him a few days ago during his last visit. So our discussion now focused on preparing case files to hold perpetrator from Assad regime accountable within Syria, as well as practical challenges involved. Despite these positive developments, there are lessons to consider. Our concern is the tendency of the UN, and I'm working as a consultant at the UNDP. So there is like tendency of the United Nations to apply a broad institutional approach across all its bodies, including highly specialized mechanism. Commission of Inquiry, IIIM requires technical experts. However, their meetings sometimes include board invitations to civil society organizations that lack necessity, specialization, or credibility. I have raised this issue repeatedly and hope it will be addressed. Finally, victims' participation must be embedded in every stage of justice process, not reduced to consultation alone. Meaningful participation required awareness and education. Informing victims is an essential component of empowering them. Participation must also be inclusive. Here we need inclusive. In Syria, unfortunately, we observe the phenomenon of star victims, where almost the same individuals are repeatedly invited to events. A more equitable approach would ensure that ordinary victims are also included. Moreover, participation strategies must account for socio-economic realities and remain sensitive to victims' resources and physiological well-being. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. AbdulGhany. That was very, very insightful. And with that, we are going to move to our fourth speaker. Our next speaker is Ms. Beatrice Balbin, Head of Human Rights Inquiries Branch at the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. Her branch supports UN investigative mechanisms worldwide, and she has served in senior UN roles across Africa, South Asia, Latin America, and the Balkans. Ms. Balbin, as the independent investigative mechanism for Afghanistan moves from paper to operationalization, how has the OHCHR engaged victims and civil society during its setup phase? And what concrete modalities are foreseen to institutionalize safe and inclusive engagement going forward? You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Sonia, and thank you for the organizers for giving me the opportunity to come here and share with you a little bit more. I know some of you have been in the previous side event, so I will not go into the same topics that we cover about the terms of reference and the operationalization. But let me tell you, the role of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, as you probably know, is not to do the substantive part of the work of the independent mechanism that will take off once all the resources are put in place and it can be operationalized. We've been requested to facilitate the work, the preparatory work and the operationalization. And so the first part of your question, which is how we engaged with the civil society in that part of the process, I can give you a little bit the rundown of chronologically how we've gone about that. So on 8th of December, the Human Rights Inquiries Branch that I represent here from the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights held conversations and consultations online with a number of civil society from Afghanistan. And there were a number of points that were systematically raised and repeated by a number of partners. I will list some of them that have been integrated in the terms of reference that would be guiding the work of the mechanism once it starts working. Some of those main points that were brought to our attention were the following. The Afghan mechanism's success depends on meaningful, diverse and sustained engagement with Afghan civil society, as we have heard. A consultative victim-centered approach is essential, potentially through the establishment of a representative Afghan advisory board. Stronger complementarity with civil society organizations is needed, including support for their sustainability, expertise sharing, and interoperable evidence systems. And this we heard in the previous event, colleagues from Afghanistan requesting so. The comprehensive, non-time limited mandate of the mechanism must be preserved. The mechanism should be able to contribute to future transitional justice efforts. Cooperation from all UN entities, particularly UNAMA, should be ensured. Full independence of the mechanism's leadership must be safeguarded. Terms of reference should require dedicated gender and child rights expertise. An intersectional approach inclusive of LGBT, SOGIASC rights should be embedded in the terms of reference, and robust survivor-centered protection measures must be clearly reflected in the terms of reference. The Assistant Secretary General for Human Rights will be presenting on behalf of the Secretary General later on at the council session. The terms of reference, you will be happy to hear that most of the recommendations that we heard from partners have been written and reflected there. We also received written submissions from participants and their networks that we encourage until the end of the year to be able to feed into the draft terms of reference. And we also had meetings with international NGOs. That was a meeting that took place on 1st of December. We also received written submissions of very high quality, which have been compiled and will be eventually shared with the head of the mechanism once the person is appointed. And some key aspects that were raised in those submissions are as follows. So a broad and comprehensive mandate covering past and ongoing violations by all actors should be preserved. Transparent reporting to the UN and the Secretary General for Legal Affairs should be ensured. A structured consultation with the mechanism should occur with Afghan civil society through Afghan Advisory Board or Civil Society Working Group. Inclusive outreach beyond urban centers, ensuring engagement with rural communities, minorities, displaced, former security personnel, LGBTQI+, persons with disabilities, alongside systematic translation and accessible communication. Prioritizing recruitment of qualified Afghan experts and embedding survivor-centered, age-responsive and gender-responsive approaches with dedicated expertise on gender-based crimes, crimes against children, and gender persecution before and after August 2021. Robust source protection and risk mitigation measures should be put in place. Coordination with the mandate of the Special Rapporteur for Afghanistan that we had in the previous meeting. Ensuring the mechanism's funding does not divert resources from Afghan civil society, but is supported through dedicated additional donor funding. And we have many member states here today. Appointment of a head of mechanism with proven expertise in gender justice, child rights, and victim-centered accountability, ensuring meaningful child participation and multidimensional approach to justice that we also have heard in the previous meeting. We have also had bilateral discussions with NGOs to gather their views and provide updates on the operationalization of the independent investigative mechanism for Afghanistan. At this stage, we did not contact survivors living inside Afghanistan because at this point in time, we don't have the means to secure and protect them, but that will be included. Now, that responds to the first part of the question. The second part of the question as to how to ensure that this kind of coordination continues once the mechanism becomes operational. As I mentioned before, we have helped in developing the terms of reference, getting all the inputs and gathering it. And it is very good that we heard from the other two existing mechanisms, because they also were consulted in the preparation of the terms of reference. There is a wealth of expertise there that can guide, together with the terms of reference, the new mechanism once it is properly staffed. And as we said, all the recommendations that we've received will be shared with the head of a mechanism once the person is appointed. But it's not going to be working in isolation. Obviously, we'll continue consulting with the existing mechanisms. It will continue consulting with the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in good practices, and also using the same networks, the mission in Afghanistan, our office, the Human Rights Inquiries branch of the Office of the High Commissioner, because we do have also a lot of expertise in guiding the work of commissions of inquiry, fact-finding missions, and others. Once the terms of reference are available, you will see that all of this is really reflected there, and although, well, the terms of reference remain flexible, so we don't decide on behalf of the head of the mechanisms once appointed, but the context is there in the terms of reference. So I'm pretty sure it could continue the good cooperation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And you mentioned the victims. So before moving to Dr. Huma Saeed, we are going to have a short video of the victims and their expectations from the mechanism. Please put your headphones on for better quality of sound.
Today, I speak not only as a women's rights activist, but as a survivor of crimes and imprisonment by a terrorist group. I was detained, interrogated, and experienced life in a Taliban prison. Not just a deprivation of freedom, but an attempt to break my voice. We were denied not only our liberty, but the right to be seen, to be heard, and to be believed. The greatest pain for many of us was not the imprisonment itself, but the uncertainty of whether real justice would ever exist. Creating an investigative mechanism for Afghanistan is a historic step, but the most important question for me is that, will it truly listen to us? Three options are vital to me. One, this mechanism must be victim-centered, ensuring safety, informed consent, and psychological support for those who testify. Number two, transparent and ongoing communication with victims and civil society is essential. We must be partners in the justice process, not just sources of information. Number three, special attention to gender-based crimes is critical. The systematic oppression of Afghan women must be documented and recognized. Justice for me is not merely a legal concept. Justice means restoring dignity. It means the world saying, we see you, we believe you, and we will not let you alone. Thank you.
Creating an independent accountability mechanism is an important opportunity for women, especially for victims inside and outside Afghanistan, to ensure that all human rights violations and crimes by the Taliban are recorded, documented, and not forgotten. I hope if you are working in this mechanism, communicate directly with victims and act with full transparency.
Today, I speak not only as a women's rights activist, but as a survivor of crime.
Yes, it's done. Okay, thank you so much for that. And with that, I'm going to move to Dr. Saeed. Our final speaker is Dr. Huma Saeed, a transitional justice expert with extensive engagement with Afghan victims community. She's a senior transitional justice fellow at the City University of New York, affiliated with the Leuven Institute of Criminology, and has served as a consultant to the UN and the ICC. Her research and practice center on victims' rights, gender justice, and accountability for economic and state crimes. Dr. Saeed, Building on the lessons and practices shared by previous speakers and based on your own experience of engagement with the victims and different phases of Afghan conflict, what are some of the shared expectations and demands for justice that mechanisms like IIMA could or should meet? What are the key recommendations for IIMA's engagement with Afghanistan's victims and civil society?
Thank you very much, Ms. Eqbal. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. I would like to thank the Afghanistan Center for Dialogue and Progress for the invitation and this opportunity, as well as other co-organizers, including the Afghanistan mission. This is a significant opportunity for myself and other Afghan fellow civil society and researcher colleagues who are here to learn about the significant experience that we heard about from Syria, from Myanmar, and how these mechanisms have been able to successfully engage, albeit with challenges. Of course, this process always bears enormous challenges with communities, particularly victims and survivors in those countries. I've taken notes from the remarks, and there's really a lot for us to learn as this mechanism is going to progress, certainly. What my own research and other documents, other research work, but particularly a document that I have followed from the very beginning when I started my research on transitional justice in 2008, and that document is called A Call for Justice. It was published in 2005 by the former Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Commission. It was based on consultation with Afghan people to understand their views and perspectives on accountability and justice. It still remains the only document that carries the voice of the people of Afghanistan as to what they demand, because unfortunately we didn't have a chance, although there was a plan, but we didn't have a chance, the Commission didn't have a chance to conduct a second follow-up such consultation. Based on this, based on research and including my own work and many interviews with victims in Afghanistan, we know that Afghan victims were victims across different periods of the Afghan conflict. And normally, when we talk about this conflict, we go back to 1978, that is with the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. Victims consistently have expressed a shared demand for recognition. As we also heard today in the words we heard, that means acknowledgement of their suffering. It is an accurate historical record of what happened. And then to denial and impunity that the people of Afghanistan, the only thing of which they have had ample has been that impunity in denial of what happened to them, and accountability and justice. In addition to what we heard from one of the testimonies here, one of the victims, I also recently heard from an expert in a workshop that recognition in itself is a form of justice. In contexts like Afghanistan and Syria, etc., we may not be able to restore what has been lost, but we may be able to restore dignity. So we just heard also that from one of the people who had survived, who is a survivor. Now, in Afghanistan, I would like to make this significant point that in Afghanistan's deeply complex and protracted conflict, the notion of victimhood is not uniform and static. It is one of the countries with a very, very complex definition, if you want to give to what victim and survivor means in Afghanistan. Patterns of harm have shifted across different regimes and actors over decades, 5 decades. And many individuals have experienced multiple and overlapping forms of victimization over time. There's also the victim-perpetrator complexity, as it was also discussed in the previous session. Those who are victims under one regime and perpetrator under another. We have many of those as well. Furthermore, victimhood in Afghanistan extends beyond violations of civil and political rights. I think for a context like Afghanistan, this is significant, and probably also on this aspect, we may learn from the other mechanisms. Decades of conflict have generated profound socioeconomic harms, including displacement, loss of livelihood, denial of education, healthcare, and structural poverty, which are central to people's lived experiences of injustice and should be acknowledged in documentation and accountability efforts. An engagement must therefore adopt a nuanced and context-specific understanding of who qualifies as victim and survivor. At the same time, it's important to avoid hierarchies of harm and engage across ethnic, regional, gender, and political divides, and to ensure, above all, as we heard in the session before, but also here, the strong emphasis on addressing sexual and gender-based crimes and crimes against children in the context of Afghanistan. This is significant. Afghan children, Afghan youth, they form the majority of Afghan population, and they have suffered significantly during conflict, but we don't even have really much understanding, much research-based understanding of the sufferings as a result of these conflicts. So this is really significant to bring, but also other marginalized communities and groups, such as the disabled people, the displaced persons. There are millions of displaced persons in Afghanistan, and the LGBTQI plus persons. It is therefore significant that the mechanism adopts a holistic approach, capturing this full spectrum of violations. We are very happy, we are grateful that finally Afghanistan has a mechanism that has a mandate which can cover all periods of Afghan conflict, all types of war crimes and crimes against humanity that have been committed in Afghanistan, all victims of these conflicts. So it is significant that this approach continues to be holistic and based on, gender sensitive and focused, and across different Afghan conflicts, which, as I was mentioning also in the session before, there have been at least 5 different kinds of political transitions in Afghanistan, without any of them ever being addressed. Now, a couple of maybe key recommendations. I would say that, we heard also from some of the testimonies here, but it is important, and also in the experiences we have had from the other mechanisms, it's important to ensure the sustained, transparent communication about the mandate and limitations. This also means producing material in local languages. Not everybody in Afghanistan may understand or speak English, so that is significant. Trauma-informed, as we also heard before, and culturally sensitive engagement practices. So in this regard, it is really significant to have people maybe from the country, people with very good knowledge, because Afghanistan is a very complex country, even for people who are from the country. As we heard, partnership with trusted Afghan civil society actors who can certainly support this process. As well as a point that I mentioned before, and maybe repetitive for those who were in that session, but this is probably to an extent an advantage, that there is a large Afghan diaspora population with many survivors among them, many victims among them, but also perpetrators, and also many competent activists, civil society actors and documenters who have already been engaged. So it seems that there is quite a lot of potential. The question is how we mobilize this, how we move forward, and above all, how we can learn from the experiences that other countries have had. I've taken notes, and I think we really will have to continue this discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Seb. Without further ado, we're open for questions. We're going to take 2 questions from the floor and 1 question online. And after those questions, respected panelists, if you could actually answer those, but also provide your concluding remarks. And each person will have only 1 minute to do that. My apologies. Yes, we have a question here. Please go ahead. Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the very interesting panel. I'm speaking on behalf of the Murad Code, which was named after Nobel Prize laureates and Yazidi activist Nadia Murad. And this is a global code of conduct for gathering and using information about systematic and conflict-related sexual violence. I really want to thank the IIIM and the IIIM, and as well as OHCHR for sharing everything they've done. I think these mechanisms have really pushed the boundaries of what we can expect in terms of survivor-centered practice. And we really hope the new mechanism will get inspiration from these practices. But I actually wanted to get back to the basics and hear from them on issues such as trauma-informed interviewing techniques, informed consent, referral protocols, risk assessment, reducing over-reliance of survivors' testimonies, and even thinking about what will happen when the mandate ends, even before the work has actually started. And I think these things may sound very basic, but we also know that there's still a challenge at times. And that's precisely why the Murad Code was developed. I want to take 20 more seconds to share a quote from a survivor who says, who's addressing, her name is Megan Nober, she's addressing Documentus. And she says, there is a profound power as a documenter. You do have the ability to make a survivor's perspective of their experience feel better or worse. You can leave a survivor feeling that they are worthwhile or that they are dirty. It's an incredible power that you have. You can bring us accountability and bring us justice to our lives, or you can bring us more trauma. So with that, I just want to invite also everyone to read the code. I have a few copies as well as a one-pager, so I'll leave it by the end of the room.
Thank you very much. Everyone, just to let you know that we have an extra 10 to 15 minutes, which is called the mercy time from the Secretariat. So that gives us a little bit of a breather. And with that, can you just go to the next question, please, on the floor? Yes.
Thank you. I'm speaking on behalf of the Center for Human Rights Advocacy. We're one of the co-sponsors of this event. And we pose two questions. Firstly, how far are we in terms of the timeline and the steps towards appointing the head of the IIIM-MA? And secondly, what is the timeline for the voluntary trust fund? When is it to be announced and to become operational? Thank you.
Thank you. I think both of those questions were for you, Beatrice. And we have one question online.
Hello. Am I audible?
Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you everyone and the organizers and the panelists for having this very important conversation, for insightful remarks. So as we all know, in Afghanistan is a very particularly complex context, and the mechanism has a mandate without any temporal limitation, and within the context and the cascading harms, which are both indirect and direct and generational harms that are happening in the country, and with the country with no access, and there are severe restrictions on civil society, particularly women-led organizations. So in such context, and also as Michelle suggested, building on the placing of victims and survivors at the North Star of justice decision-making, my question is very operational and very practical, that how can an investigative mechanism in such limited and constrained capacities can have intersectional and gender-responsive approach in its evidence collection and prioritization? Specifically, how do we ensure that gender persecution and other intersectional harms that are very nuanced to Afghanistan's context are not structurally deprioritized when investigative resources or the political funding are limited, and also when documentation by the CSOs are very constrained because of the policies on the ground and limited access on the ground? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tanvi. We got your questions. And with that, we're going to go back to our panelists. So you'll be responding to the question if it was posed to you or if you have an answer towards it. And also with that, you'll give a 1 minute concluding remark. And Beatrice, we're going to start with you because some of the questions were for you.
Thank you very much. On the timeline for the recruitment of the head of the mechanism and the setting up of the trust fund, the preparatory work that was entrusted to the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights was done. The D2 profile was built, and I don't know if you're familiar with the processes in the UN. It's being classified and it should be advertised soonest. And so hopefully in the next few weeks, we will get the candidates already in for the appointment. And as for the trust fund, also the necessary process has been followed. Is now with New York to finalize the paperwork. But what I can say is, and I've discussed with a number of potential donors and member states, we don't need to wait for the trust fund to be formally open. As the kind of interim support provider, the Office of the High Commissioner can receive that money for the purposes of the mechanism, not for the work of the Office of the High Commissioner. So also it is going to be finalized soonest, but the money can still be sent already without waiting for us. Just one final word on what happens. I don't remember who mentioned that. I think what happens after the mechanism closes. Let's say that in the preparation of the terms of reference for this particular mechanism, based on the fact that the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights through the Human Rights Inquiries branch does deal with all the closed investigative mechanisms, 39 of them, commissions of inquiry, fact-finding missions that have concluded their work and were finalized. We are the ones inheriting the records and evidence, and we are the ones keeping them alive, so that if there are requests for judicial cooperation, we will be the ones being responsible for that. So based on that good practice and experience, we have included that in the terms of reference. So eventually, when the mechanism, whenever that would be, concludes its work, the records and evidence would be still alive, because the Office of the High Commissioner will continue working on those. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. Ms. Jarvis, we'll go to you for your concluding remarks.
Thank you very much. Perhaps I can touch on the question, Helena, that you raised about the trauma-informed approaches. So, of course, the Murad Code, an important new resource and source of information about how victims and survivors would like documentation practices to be carried out. So I think obviously it is really important to be accessing all of those valuable tools. What you raise is perhaps a distinction that we've seen in our field of practice between these victim-centred approaches in the context of direct engagement with victims and survivors as witnesses, where I think we have much more developed practice, and over the years that has been the major focus. But what we're talking about here as well is engagement with victims and survivors in the context of consultations about the nature of the justice process. So not as evidence providers, but as owners and rights holders in the accountability process. And I think that's what's novel coming out of the experience of the mechanisms, is a recognition that there is this other piece that we need to be paying attention to. And the way that we build out a victim and survivor-centred approach in that context is different, but needs much, much more attention. So I think we now know what we need to do, and we're moving forward with it. And then perhaps the other question online, Tanvi asked about how do you really go about entrenching a meaningful gender approach as a core part of the work. And it's a hugely important question. I think at the IIIM, we have really tried over the last 9 years of our work to do exactly that, to move gender and intersectionality from a peripheral thing that actors turn to if and when they have time and resources, to really becoming a core part of all of the work that we do, and building the IIIM as a gender-sensitive institutional environment, knowing that if we don't succeed in that from an institutional perspective, we'll never be able to deliver sustained gender-inclusive outcomes in the justice work that we do. So it's a much bigger topic, a huge amount of insights and lessons learned, and I hope there will be more opportunities to really dig deeper into some of those really valuable lessons.
Absolutely. I second that. It definitely seems like we have to have another event on this. Ms. Segoete, please, your final concluding remarks.
Thank you very much. And I'll give an answer to the question of informed consent to victims and witnesses that we engage with. And I'll start also with highlighting that whenever all the time that we engage with witnesses, we always clarify that cooperation with the mechanism is voluntary. And on that basis, witnesses already know that they have a choice either to engage or not to engage. And then having engaged, then they need to know what's going to happen to the information that they have provided to us. And all the time we sit down with witnesses and record their statements. We have very extensive discussions on informed consent to let them know that how their information is going to be used and to have their consent. And it's so extensive that it goes to the extent of us I'll give an example of one of the sharing judicial authorities that we share with maybe the ICJ, to let them know what the ICJ is about, what case it is they are trying, everything they need to know about the case that would inform them on whether they would agree for their information to be shared with the ICJ and all other sharing partners that we provide materials to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next, Mr. AbdulGhany, your 1 minute concluding remarks, please.
Like, my advice here is collaboration with the UN mechanism is inventable. And you can criticize the UN, but don't fight. What I noticed sometimes that some organization, they criticize the UN mechanism, and they want, because they thought that the UN is taking the fund dedicated for the state. I think that, and this is also a message for the Syrian Authority as well, that the collaborating with the UN is meaning legitimacy, is meaning building capacity, is meaning it's a process, and we cannot succeed without those mechanisms. Actually, we cannot work alone. We need this experience, and at the same time, we have our own context. We need to provide it and to share it. The main to proceed is to build a criteria. Sometimes the UN is so bureaucratic, so they are moving without specific criteria, the victims' participation, but organization participation as well. So those are my advice to moving forward.
Thank you very much. Dr. Saeed.
Thank you very much. I think I quickly want to allude to the question about how to have this intersectional gender-focused approach for a complex context such as Afghanistan. I mean, yes, there are many challenges of doing this kind of work in a country like Afghanistan, especially from diaspora, but it's certainly not impossible. The Afghan diaspora in exile has become quite organized, quite focused. In fact, as it was also mentioned before, it was thanks to that kind of focused advocacy in a big part, that we have this mechanism. It's important to remember that the Afghan diaspora in exile, many of them have contacts with the civil society, with individuals inside Afghanistan, including victims, including survivors. They have become very creative, when there are limitations, you have to become creative. So there are many ways that they have been able to even do documentation. There are organizations that keep doing documentation, getting the information from inside Afghanistan. So we have opportunities. The important thing is that it is central, as it was mentioned, not a periphery issue, it's central. It is in the framework, in our mindset, in our approach. And once again, I think we really have a lot to learn from the other countries, Syria, Myanmar. I follow personally to some extent, Syrian situation and Syrian diaspora civil society. And I hope we have more opportunities to engage in, like, maybe training opportunities or other information exchange sessions that the Afghan diaspora, civil society activists, etc., we're having those platforms. So hopefully we will continue this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Definitely, I think it clearly explains that this is a great beginning right after, the process of the accountability mechanism is starting, hopefully their operationalization. And there is a lot of lessons that can be learned and a lot of collaboration and consultation that needs to take place. So definitely it's going to be done in the future. And with that, I would like to thank our panelists and everyone who participated and here in person, and also all of those of you who were online. Thank you so much for your time. And my one line would be: the establishment of IIMA presents a rare opportunity, but its success will depend on how it listens, how it consults, and how it partners. With that, thank you very much and have a wonderful day.